The emergency alarm echoed through the Galactic Council chambers for the first time in 70 years. Ambassador Taemin stumbled into the circular hall, his breathing heavy and his eyes wide with terror. The other council members looked up from their seats, confused by the sudden disturbance. Taemin was a Velen, a species known for their calm nature and peaceful ways. Seeing him in such a state sent waves of concern through the assembled delegates. "They're coming," Taemin gasped, his voice breaking. "The Krell. They've entered our system. Our defense platforms are already destroyed. They're burning our outer colonies right now." The chamber fell silent. Every species in the galaxy knew about the Krell. They were the nightmare that parents used to scare children into behaving. A hive-mind species that consumed everything in their path, leaving nothing but dead worlds behind. They hadn't been seen in this sector for decades. Everyone hoped they had moved on to some other part of the galaxy. Chairman Dayun stood up from her elevated seat. She was a Thorin, a species that had led the council for centuries. "How many ships?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear growing in her chest. 47 capital ships. Hundreds of smaller attack craft. Our military is trying to evacuate civilians from the surface, but we don't have time. Maybe a few hours before they reach our home world. Taemin collapsed into a nearby chair. "I'm begging you. Send help. Send anyone. My people are dying." Commander High One of the Arcturian Defense Force accessed her datapad, her multiple eyes scanning through reports. "Our nearest fleet is 3 weeks away at maximum speed. Even if we ordered them to move right now, the Velen system would be gone before they arrived halfway there." Other council members began speaking at once, their voices rising in the chamber. Some suggested diplomatic contact with the Krell, despite knowing they never communicated. Others worried about the precedent of committing military forces. A few simply sat in shocked silence, grateful that their own worlds were far from the danger. "We must do something," insisted Ambassador Kongsik of the Denari Republic. His people had lost 2 colonies to the Krell a century ago. "We cannot just sit here and watch another species die." "What do you suggest?" snapped Admiral Su Jin, a military observer from the Korin Empire. "Should we send our ships on a suicide mission? The Krell have destroyed every fleet that ever faced them. We need time to coordinate, to plan, to assemble enough forces to actually make a difference." Time was the one thing they didn't have. Taemin looked around the chamber desperately, seeing the fear and hesitation in every face. These were the most powerful species in the galaxy, and they were paralyzed. His people would die while these leaders debated procedures and protocols. Got in the back of the chamber. A young analyst named Jiho stood up. He was Salarian, a species known more for their academic achievements than military service. Most of the council members didn't even notice him at first. "There is one option," he said quietly. Chairman Daeyun gestured for silence. "Speak, Analyst Jiho. We could contact the humans." The words hung in the air like a dangerous chemical. Several council members actually recoiled in their seats. "Their fleet patrols the outer regions. They might be close enough to respond." "Absolutely not," said Commander High One immediately. "The humans are barely civilized. They've been part of the council for only 30 years. We barely understand them." Admiral Su Jin nodded in agreement. "They're predators. Deathworlders from a planet that tried to kill them at every turn. Their entire history is nothing but warfare and violence. Inviting them into this situation could make things worse." "Worse than extinction?" Jiho's voice was stronger now. "The Velen have ours. The humans have ships. They have weapons. And from everything I've studied about them, they have something else we don't have right now. They have courage." Taemin grabbed onto this hope like a drowning man reaching for a rope. "Please, I don't care what they are. If they can help my people, If they can save even a fraction of our population, then contact them. I'm begging you. The debate continued for another 20 minutes. Every minute wasted was another minute the Krell moved closer to the Valenho world. Finally, Chairman Dayoon made her decision. We will send the distress call to human space. But I want it clear that this is a request, not a demand. If they refuse or if they take too long to mobilize, we cannot blame them. Ji-Ho moved quickly to the communication station. He composed the message carefully, including all tactical data about the Krell fleet and the Velen system. His hands shook slightly as he pressed the transmit button. The message would take several minutes to reach human space. And who knew how long before they even responded? The council members sat in uncomfortable silence, watching the main display that showed the Krell fleet's steady advance. Tae-min prayed to gods he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. Commander Hai-1 calculated casualty estimates. Admiral Su-jin wondered if calling the humans would simply result in watching two predator species fight over the Velen corpse. 8 minutes later, the communication system beeped. Ji-Ho stared at his screen in disbelief. We have a response, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Already? Chairman Dayoon moved to look at the message herself. What do they say? Ji-Ho read the message aloud, and it contained only 2 sentences. Human Rapid Response Fleet acknowledging distress call. Eta to Velen system. 4 hours. The chamber erupted into chaos. 4 hours? That was impossible. The nearest human territory was at least 6 hours away, even at maximum speed. How did they even have ships in position? More importantly, they were already moving. There had been no debate, no committees, no requests for clarification. Just immediate action. How many ships are they sending? Asked Admiral Su-Jin.Ji-Ho. Checked the data packet attached to the message. 10 ships. 1 dreadnought class, 3 cruisers, 6 destroyers. 10 ships against 47? Commander Hai-1 laughed bitterly. They're going to die. We've sent them to their deaths. But Tae-min felt something he hadn't felt since the alarms first sounded. He felt hope. Because somewhere in the galaxy, someone had heard his people's screams and decided to run toward the danger instead of away from it. The humans were coming. Whether that was salvation or simply a different kind of doom, he would find out in 4 hours. Chairman Dayoon ordered all monitoring stations to track the human fleet's approach. Whatever happened next, the galaxy was about to learn something about the species from Earth. Something that would change everything. Captain Min Seo stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Indomitable, watching the stars streak past as they pushed the engines beyond their recommended limits. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency around her, each person focused on their task. No panic, no fear, just the calm determination that came from knowing exactly what needed to be done. The distress call had reached them 30 minutes ago. Min Seo had been drinking coffee in her ready room when the communication officer burst through the door. She had read the message twice, set down her cup, and pressed the ship-wide alert. The entire fleet went from standard patrol to combat readiness in 90 seconds. That was the human way. When someone called for help, you answered. You could figure out the details while moving. Captain, we're receiving a secondary data stream from the Council monitoring stations, said Lieutenant Hyun-woo from his position at communications. They're tracking the Krell fleet's movements in real time now. Min Seo studied the tactical display. 47 ships. She had faced worse odds before, but never against the Krell. Humanity had been aware of the Krell for years, study every scrap of information they could find. While the Council species feared them, human military analysts had been fascinated. The Krell were apex predators, just like humans. The difference was that humans had learned to aim their predatory instincts at things that deserved hunting. Get me Commander Jae-sung, Min Seo ordered, A moment later, the grizzled face of the Marine Corps commander appeared on her screen. Behind him, she could see dozens of Marines checking weapons and equipment. "Captain," he said simply, "we'll be in the Velen system in 3.5 hours. I need your people ready for ground operations." Intelligence suggests the Krell have already deployed shock troops to the surface. Jae-sung nodded. "My Marines are always ready." "What's the situation with the civilians?" "The Velen are evacuating to underground shelters, but they're not built for this kind of assault. Their entire species has been at peace for centuries. They don't have bunkers or weapons or any real defensive positions, so we're their only hope." "Yes." Jae-sung's expression hardened. "Then we better make it count. I'll have drop pods ready to launch the moment we enter orbit." Min Seo closed the channel and returned her attention to the main display. Her XO, Commander Sung-ho, moved to stand beside her. He was older than most of the crew, a veteran of the Proxima Wars who had seen humanity at its worst and best. "The Council is probably terrified right now," Sung-ho said quietly. "They called the monsters to fight the monsters." "We're not monsters," Min Seo replied. "We're just willing to do what needs to be done." To them, there's no difference. Min Seo knew he was right. The other species in the Council looked at humanity and saw Deathworlders who had clawed their way to the top of Earth's food chain through millions of years of violence. They saw the wars in human history, the conflicts, the aggression. What they didn't see was why humans fought. They fought to protect the weak. They fought to stop bullies. They fought because sometimes fighting was the only way to save lives. The hours passed quickly. The fleet maintained formation, each ship precisely positioned for the attack run they had planned. Human naval doctrine was aggressive compared to Council standards. While other species focused on defensive positions and long-range bombardment, humans preferred to close distance and hit hard. It came from their nature as pursuit predators, from millions of years of chasing prey across African plains. "Approaching the Velen system," announced the navigation officer. "The Krell fleet is in orbit around the 4th planet. That's the Velen home world." Min Seo could see it now on the long-range sensors. The Krell ships surrounded the planet like a swarm of insects. Some were already firing on the surface, burning through defensive positions and population centers. She felt anger rise in her chest, cold and focused. This was what the Krell did. They consumed and destroyed, because that's all they knew. All ships, battle formation Delta 3. Weapons free on my mark. Min Seo's voice was calm, but every person on the bridge could hear the steel underneath. "Communications. Open a channel to the Krell fleet on all frequencies." "Channel open, Captain." "Krell vessels, this is Captain Min Seo of the Human Defense Fleet. You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately. The Velen are under our protection. You have 1 minute to comply, or we will open fire." Silence. The Krell never responded to communication. They probably didn't even understand the concept. They just took what they wanted and killed anything in their way. Sung-ho checked his timer. 1 minute is up. "Then let's teach them about human stubbornness." Min Seo leaned forward in her command chair. "All ships engage." The human fleet split into 3 groups, each one driving straight toward different sections of the Krell formation. The Krell ships responded immediately, launching swarms of attack drones and firing their organic plasma weapons. The space between the fleets lit up with weapons fire. "Evasive pattern Alpha. Point defense systems engage." Min Seo watched as the Indomitable's defensive guns shredded incoming fire with computer-guided precision. Human ships danced through the chaos, their movements aggressive and unpredictable. Forward railguns fire. The Indomitable shuddered as its main weapons unleashed metal slugs at incredible speeds. The projectiles crossed the distance in heartbeats. slamming into Krell bioships with devastating force. The alien vessels had armor designed to absorb energy weapons, but they had no defense against solid matter, traveling at relativistic speeds. One Krell cruiser simply came apart as a railgun shot punched through its entire length. "Target destroyed," shouted the weapons officer. Acquiring new target. Around them, the rest of the human fleet engaged with similar ferocity. The cruisers focused on the Krell middle ranks, using their missile batteries to overwhelm enemy point defense. The destroyers darted between larger ships, their smaller size making them hard to target, while their weapons carved into Krell flanks. Lieutenant Hyan Wu had launched with his fighter squadron, and Min Co could track their progress on her tactical display. 20 human fighters against hundreds of Krell attack drones. It should have been suicide, but the human pilots flew with a combination of skill and aggression that the Krell couldn't match. They worked in pairs, covering each other, setting up kills, moving like a pack of wolves through a flock of sheep. "Captain, the Krell are trying to reform their lines," reported Sung Ho. "They're adapting to our tactics. Then we adapt faster. All ships execute attack pattern Sigma. Take us right through their center." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Sigma was one of the most aggressive maneuvers in human naval doctrine, requiring ships to drive directly through enemy formations at close range. It was dangerous and brutal, exactly the kind of tactic that made other Council species uncomfortable. But it worked. The Indomitable accelerated, aiming for the gap between two Krell capital ships. Weapons fired continuously, the ship's shields flaring as they absorbed return fire. Then they were through, emerging behind the Krell lines with clear shots at their command vessels. "Fire everything." The night lit up with human fury, and the Krell began to realize they had made a terrible mistake. The battle had been raging for 20 minutes, and the Krell were learning a harsh lesson. They had expected prey, something to hunt and consume like all the others. Instead, they found themselves facing something that hunted back. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Min Co watched as another Krell ship broke apart under sustained fire. The Krell bioships were tough, but human weapons were designed by a species that had spent thousands of years finding better ways to kill things. Every railgun, every missile, every energy weapon had been refined through countless conflicts. "Captain, the Krell vanguard is falling back," reported Commander Sung Ho. "We've destroyed 17 of their capital ships and crippled 11 more. They're trying to regroup." Min Co studied the tactical display. The Krell were creatures of instinct and hive coordination, but they were encountering something their collective mind hadn't prepared for. Humans fought with both calculated strategy and raw aggression, switching between them in ways that confused the enemy. Don't give them time to adapt. Send the order to all ships. Press the attack. Target their command nodes. Across the system, human vessels surged forward. The destroyers moved like sharks, fast and deadly, tearing into damaged Krell ships before they could retreat. The cruisers maintained steady fire, their missile batteries creating zones of destruction that the Krell couldn't safely cross. Lieutenant Hyan Wu's voice crackled over the communication system. "Fighter Wing Alpha to Indomitable. We've cleared the drone screen. Requesting permission to engage Krell capital ships directly." "Granted," Minze replied. "Watch your fuel levels." She watched on her screens as the human fighters dove toward the largest Krell vessels. Each fighter was tiny compared to the massive bioships, but they carried weapons specifically designed for this kind of attack. They wove through defensive fire with incredible skill, each pilot trusting their wingmen to cover blind spots. It was pack tactics, refined over millions of years of evolution and adapted for space combat. The fighters released their payloads, armor-piercing missiles that burrowed into Krell hulls before detonating. One massive Krell ship shuddered as internal explosions rippled through its structure. A bioship tried to seal the breaches, but the damage was too severe. It began to drift, lifeless. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission from the Velen surface," said the communications officer. "It's Ambassador Taemin." A screen flickered to life, showing the Velen ambassador in what looked like an underground shelter. Behind him, dozens of frightened civilians huddled together. "Captain Min Seo," Taemin said, his voice shaking with emotion. "We can see the battle from our monitoring stations. You're actually winning. I don't know how to thank you." "Save your thanks until everyone's safe," Min Seo replied. "What's the situation on the ground?" The Krell landed shock troops in several population centers. "Our security forces are trying to hold them back, but they're not trained for this. We're losing ground everywhere. Help is on the way. Hold your positions as long as you can." Min Seo closed the channel and switched to the marine deck. Commander Jae-sung appeared, already suited up in combat armor. Behind him, 200 Marines prepared for deployment. "Commander, the Velen need immediate ground support. Multiple landing zones." "We're ready, Captain. Just get us down there." The Indomitable shuddered as it took fire from a Krell cruiser. Min Seo felt the deck vibrate under her feet, but the shields held. "Return fire, all batteries." The dreadnought's weapons spoke as his. One, and the Krell cruiser simply ceased to exist, torn apart by the concentrated barrage. But more Krell ships were moving to intercept them, trying to prevent the Marines from reaching the surface. "Sung-ho, take command of the fleet," Min Seo ordered. "Keep the Krell busy up here. I'm taking the Indomitable down to provide orbital support for the ground troops." "That's risky, Captain. If they focus fire on us in atmosphere, then we better make sure they're too busy to focus." Min Seo turned to her helm officer. "Take us in. Combat descent." The Indomitable broke from the main battle, accelerating toward the planet. Krell ships tried to pursue, but the rest of the human fleet cut them off, keeping them engaged. The dreadnought hit the atmosphere hard, its shields glowing as it burned through the upper layers. "Commander Jae-sung, you are clear for drop," Min Seo announced. "Godspeed." On the marine deck, Jae-sung gave the order. Dozens of drop pods launched from the Indomitable's belly, screaming toward the surface like meteors. Each pod contained 4 Marines and enough weapons to fight a small war. They had trained for this, practiced orbital drops 1,000 times. But this was real, with real lives depending on them. Staff Sergeant Biora felt her pod shake violently as it hit the atmosphere. She had been a Marine for 8 years, had seen action on 3 different worlds, but drops never got easier. The other 3 Marines in her pod stayed quiet, focused on the mission ahead. 30 seconds to impact, the pod's computer announced. Biora checked her rifle one more time. It was a simple weapon compared to some of the technology in the galaxy, but it was reliable and deadly. Humans had learned long ago that complicated weapons broke down when you needed them most. Simple and effective won wars. The pod hit the ground hard, the impact cushions absorbing most of the shock. The doors blew open immediately, and Biora led her team out into chaos. They had landed in the middle of a Velen city, and the destruction was everywhere. Buildings burned, bodies lay in the streets, and the sound of weapons fire echoed from every direction. "Contact, 200 meters, north side." One of her Marines called out. Bra saw them. Krell shock troops, 6 of them, tearing through a barricade where Velen security forces tried to make a stand. The Krell were big, heavily armored, and moved with the confidence of predators that had never lost a fight. "Light them up." The Marines opened fire as one. Human weapons cracked in the urban environment, and the Krell staggered under the impact. They were tough, their armor thick, but sustained fire from military-grade rifles punched through. One Krell fell, then another. The remaining Krell charged. They were fast for their size, closing the distance quickly. But Baura and her team had trained for close combat against larger opponents. They spread out, using cover, creating crossfire. One Krell came within 3 meters of her position before she put a full magazine into its head. The creature dropped. "Area secure," Baura reported, moving to assist Velen defenders. Across the city, similar scenes played out. Human Marines hit the ground hard and immediately went on the offensive. They didn't dig in or wait for support. They attacked, pushing the Krell back through sheer aggression and superior tactics. Corporal Yuna landed with her medical team near a Velen hospital that was under siege. Krell troops were trying to break through the doors where hundreds of civilians sheltered inside. Yuna didn't hesitate. She dropped her medical bag, raised her rifle, and started firing. Medical teams are combat troops first, she had been taught in training. You can't help the wounded if the enemy kills everyone. Her team cut down the Krell attackers, then immediately switched to medical mode. Yuna found wounded Velen security officers and began treatment. The Velen looked at her with a mixture of fear and gratitude. She was clearly a predator, armed and dangerous, but she was also saving their lives. "You're safe now," Yuna told a young Velen female whose name was Yunji. The civilian had been shot trying to protect children. "We're here to help." Yunji stared at the human medic through pain-filled eyes. She had heard stories about humans, about their violent nature and predatory instincts. But this human was bandaging her wounds with gentle hands while occasionally glancing up to check for threats. This human had killed to protect her and was now working to save her life. "Thank you," Yunji whispered Dot above the planet. Captain Min Seo directed orbital fire support, the Indomitable's weapons striking Krell positions with surgical precision. In space, the rest of the human fleet continued to tear through the Krell armada. The aliens had expected an easy meal and found themselves in a fight for survival. The Krell hive mind processed all the data and came to a conclusion it had never reached before. They were losing. More than that, they were being hunted. The humans fought with the same predatory instincts that the Krell used, but with better coordination, better weapons, and something the Krell had never developed: the choice to protect instead of consume. The order rippled through the Krell fleet. Retreat, survive, warn the others about the humans. Commander Jae-Sung moved through the burning streets of the Velen capital city with his command squad. Around him, the battle was turning. The Krell shock troops that had seemed unstoppable an hour ago were now retreating, confused and disorganized. They had never faced an enemy that fought back with such ferocity. "Command, this is Ground Team 7, a voice crackled over the communication network. "We've secured the eastern residential sector. Krell forces are pulling back. We're pursuing." "-7, Jae-Sung replied. "Hold your position and establish a defensive perimeter. Focus on protecting civilians. Let the Krell run." Jae-Sung had learned long ago that victory wasn't just about killing the enemy. It was about achieving your objectives. Their objective was protecting the Velen, not racking up kill counts. If the Krell wanted to retreat, let them go. Every Krell soldier running away was one that wasn't shooting at civilians. He rounded a corner and found Staff Sergeant Biora's squad helping Velen civilians out of a collapsed shelter. The Marines worked quickly, moving rubble and pulling survivors to safety. One of the Marines was sharing his water with frightened Velen children. "Status?" Jae-Sung asked. 42 civilians rescued, Commander. 3 Velen security officers wounded but stable. No Marine casualties. Biora wiped sweat from her forehead. "The Krell in this sector have fallen back. I think they're regrouping near the spaceport. Captain Min Seo is tracking them from orbit. If they mass up, she hit them with orbital strikes. Jae-sung looked at the Velen civilians. They were staring at the human soldiers with wide eyes. Fear, gratitude, confusion, all mixed together. How are the locals handling us? They're scared, but they understand we're here to help. One of them called me a kind monster. I think that's the best we're going to get. Jae-sung nodded. Humans had gotten used to that reaction from other species. They looked at human biology and saw predators. Forward-facing eyes for tracking prey. Omnivorous teeth built for tearing meat. A body structure designed for pursuit hunting. What they couldn't see was the choice that humans made every day to use those predatory instincts to protect rather than destroy. Young Velen female approached him cautiously. She was injured, one arm bandaged, but she moved with determination. "Are you the human commander?" She asked an accented but clear standard. "I am. Commander Jae-sung, Earth Marine Corps. My name is Yoonji. I wanted to thank you. Your people saved my life, saved my family, saved my entire world." Her voice broke with emotion. "We thought we were going to die. We sent the distress call to the council, but we didn't really believe anyone would come. And then you came. You actually came." Jae-sung felt the weight of her words. This was why humans fought. Not for glory or conquest, but for moments like this. For the chance to stand between evil and innocent lives. Will always come when someone calls for help. That's what humans do. Yoon-ji touched his armored hand briefly, a gesture of respect in Velen culture. "I was afraid of you when I first saw your medic. She looked so fierce, so dangerous. But then she saved my life. I don't understand your people, Commander. How can you be so violent and so kind at the same time?" "Because we choose to be," Jae-sung replied simply. "We have the capacity for violence, yes. But we also have the capacity to decide when to use it and when to show mercy. The galaxy looks at humans and sees predators. They're not wrong. But we're predators who decided a long time ago what we wanted to hunt. And we hunt things like the Krell. Above them, the sky lit up with weapons fire. Captain Min Seo's dreadnought was engaging Krell ships that were trying to escape the system. The space battle had been raging for over an hour now, and the humans were dominating completely. "Commander, this is Captain Min Seo." The communication system crackled to life. "The Krell fleet is breaking off. They're running. The cowards are actually running. Pursue?" Jae-sung asked. "Negative. Our mission was to protect the Velen, and we've done that. Let the Krell run back to whatever hole they crawled out of. They'll spread the word about what happens when you mess with humans." There was satisfaction in Min Seo's voice. "How's the ground situation?" "Krell forces are retreating to their landing zones. They're trying to evacuate. Velen casualties are high, but it would have been total extinction without our intervention. We'll have final numbers in a few hours." "Good work, Commander. Secure the surface and start helping with rescue operations. The Council is sending aid ships, but they won't arrive for another day at least." Jae-sung organized his Marines into rescue and security teams. They spread throughout the city, pulling survivors from collapsed buildings, providing medical care, and establishing order. The Velen watched these human soldiers work with growing amazement. One moment, they were lethal warriors cutting down Krell shock troops. The next moment, they were carefully carrying wounded children to safety. Corporal Yuna worked at a makeshift medical station, treating a steady stream of injured Velen. Her medical training was advanced by human standards, which made it incredibly advanced by galactic standards. Humans had spent thousands of years learning how to patch people up after wars, and that expertise showed. "You need to rest," Yuna told one elderly Velen male who insisted on helping despite his injuries. "You've been through trauma. Your body needs time to recover." "My family is still missing," the old Velen replied. I can't rest until I know they're safe. Yuna understood that feeling. She called over 2 Marines. Take him to the search teams. Help him find his family. She looked at the old Velen. These soldiers will protect you and help you search. That's their job now. As the sun set on the Velen home world, the scale of the destruction became clear. Entire nay. Boarhoods were burned. Thousands were dead. But millions survived because humans answered a distress call. The Krell had planned to consume the entire species. Instead, they had been driven off by a force they never anticipated. Lieutenant Hyan Wu landed his fighter back on the Indomitable, exhausted but alive. His entire squadron had survived, though several fighters were heavily damaged. He climbed out of his cockpit and looked at the planet below. Somewhere down there, Velen families were reuniting. Somewhere down there, children who would have died were alive because he and his fellow pilots had held the line. Good flying today, his wingman said, clapping him on the shoulder. Good hunting, Hyan Wu replied, using the old pilot's phrase. But it felt different this time. They hadn't been hunting for sport or conquest. They had been hunting to protect. That made all the difference. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Min Seo watched the last Krell ships jump to faster-than-light speed, fleeing the system. Her fleet had destroyed or crippled over 30 Krell vessels. Not a single human ship had been lost. A few were damaged and would need repairs, but every crew member was coming home. Captain, we're receiving multiple transmissions from the surface, her communications officer reported. The Velen want to thank us personally. Ambassador Tae Min is requesting a meeting. Tell him I'll meet with him once we've finished securing the area. Min Seo looked at Commander Sumho. What's the final count? 17 Krell capital ships destroyed outright. 14 more crippled and drifting. The rest fled. On the ground, we estimate over 40,000 Krell troops killed or captured. Velen casualties. He paused, the number clearly affecting him. 847 dead. Thousands more wounded. But without our intervention, the entire species would have been extinct in 6 hours. 847 lives lost. Each one was a tragedy. Each one represented a family destroyed, a future ended. But millions had been saved. Sometimes that was the best you could do. Sometimes saving most of the people was still a victory, even when it felt like a failure. Make sure every Marine knows they did well today, Minso said quietly. They saved the world. That's not something everyone can say. In the council chambers, billions of light years away, the leaders of the galaxy watched recordings of the battle. They saw human ships charge directly into Krell formations. They saw human Marines drop into active war zones without hesitation. They saw a species that should have been terrified of the Krell, instead teach the Krell what fear really meant, and they realized something that changed the balance of power in the galaxy. Humans weren't just another species. They were the predators who had learned to protect the prey. And that made them the most dangerous force in the galaxy, because they chose what to hunt. The Galactic Council chambers had never been so quiet. 3 days had passed since the battle at the Velen system, and the council members sat in their seats, looking at the detailed reports displayed on the central screen. The numbers told a story that should have been impossible. Admiral Su Jin stood at the presentation podium, her multiple arms gesturing at the data. Total Velen casualties: 847 dead, 2,300 wounded. Without human intervention, our projections showed complete extinction of the species within 6 hours. Population that would have been lost: 340 million. The silence deepened. Every council member understood what those numbers meant. The humans had saved an entire species from extinction. More than that, they had done it against the Krell, the nightmare that every spacefaring civilization feared. Krell casualties. Admiral Su Jin continued. 43,000 ground troops killed or captured. 17 capital ships destroyed. 14 more disabled beyond repair. The remaining Krell fleet fled the system and has not been detected in any nearby sector since. Chairman Dayun leaned forward in her elevated seat. What were the human casualties? 0 deaths. 47 wounded, all expected to make full recovery. No ships lost, though 2 destroyers and 1 cruiser sustained moderate damage. The chamber erupted into shocked conversations. 0 deaths? Against the Krell? It was unthinkable. The Krell had destroyed entire fleets from species that had been spacefaring for thousands of years. The humans had been in space for barely 2 centuries, and they had crushed a Krell invasion force without losing a single person. Ambassador Taemin stood up, his voice cutting through the noise. I wish to make a formal statement. The chamber fell silent again. Taemin looked around at his fellow council members, his eyes still showing the trauma of the past days. My people owe our existence to humanity. When we called for help, you debated. You calculated. You hesitated. But the humans simply came. They didn't ask for payment. They didn't demand concessions. They came because we asked, and they bled to protect people they had never met. They didn't bleed, someone muttered. They didn't lose anyone. They risked everything. Taemin shot back. Every human on those ships knew they might die. They came anyway. And yes, their skill and technology meant they won without deaths. That doesn't make their choice less meaningful. It makes it more impressive. Chairman Dayun raised a hand for silence. Ambassador Taemin, what are you requesting? The Velen Republic formally requests a defense alliance with humanity. We want to be under human protection. We trust them more than we trust this council. The words hit like a physical blow. Several council members started protesting immediately. Commander High One stood up, her voice sharp. You're overreacting out of gratitude and trauma. The humans are dangerous. They're predators. Just because they saved you doesn't mean you should trust them completely. Dangerous? Taemin laughed, but there was no humor in it. Yes, they're dangerous. That's exactly why I want them protecting us. The Krell are dangerous too, but they use that danger to destroy. Humans use it to protect. I've seen it with my own eyes. Ji-Ho, the young analyst who had suggested calling the humans, stood up from his seat in the back. If I may speak, Chairman? Yoon nodded. I've spent the last 3 days analyzing every second of the battle footage. The humans fought with extraordinary efficiency, yes. But what struck me most was their restraint. When Krell forces tried to surrender, the humans accepted. When they had opportunities to pursue and destroy the fleeing Krell fleet, they chose to stay and help with rescue operations instead. They had the power to commit genocide against the Krell, and they chose mercy. Mercy? Admiral Su Jin's voice was skeptical. They killed over 40,000 Krell soldiers. In defense of innocent civilians, Yeho replied. There's a difference between necessary violence and cruelty. Humans understand that difference. Most of us have forgotten it. The debate continued for another hour before Chairman Dayun called for order. We've received a communication from Captain Nin Co. She's requesting permission to address the council directly. Let her speak, Taemin said immediately. A moment later, Captain Min Co's image appeared on the main display. She was on the bridge of the Indomitable, still in orbit around the Velen home world. Behind her, crew members moved with calm efficiency. Chairman Dayun, council members, Min Co began. I've been informed there's some concern about human actions during the Velen crisis. I'd like to address those concerns directly. Captain Min Co, Dayun replied. Nobody is questioning your effectiveness. You achieved what we thought impossible. The concern is about what this means for the balance of power in the galaxy. Min Seo nodded slowly. I understand. You're afraid of us. You've been afraid since we joined the Council. You look at our history and see thousands of years of warfare. You look at our biology and see predators. You're right about all of that. We are predators. We are warriors. Our entire species was forged through conflict. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But here's what you need to understand, Min Seo continued, her voice firm. Humans learned something during all those wars. We learned that strength without purpose is just destruction. We learned that the strongest person in the room has a responsibility to protect the weakest. We learned that being a predator doesn't mean you have to hunt prey. It means you can hunt things that deserve to be hunted. Like the Krell, Geo said quietly. Like the Krell, Min Seo agreed. When we received your distress call, do you know how long it took for Earth Command to authorize our response? 90 seconds. Not because we're reckless, but because the decision was obvious. Someone called for help. We answered. That's what humans do. Chairman Da-Yoon studied the human captain carefully. And what do humans want in return? What's the price for your protection? Min Seo smiled slightly. You're so used to political calculations that you can't imagine someone acting without a price. We don't want territory. We don't want tribute. We don't want to rule over anyone. What we want is simple. We want to live in a galaxy where calling for help actually means something, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. That's idealistic, Admiral Sujin said. Maybe, but idealism backed by the ability to act makes it reality. Min Seo glanced at something off-screen, then back to the Council. I'm told that Ambassador Tae-min has requested a defense alliance with humanity. Earth Command has authorized me to accept on behalf of our government. The Velen are now under human protection. Any attack on them is an attack on us. The chamber exploded into arguments again. Some council members were outraged at humanity's presumption. Others looked thoughtful. A few looked relieved. Over the next hour, 17 more ambassadors approached the podium. Each one represented a smaller species, vulnerable worlds that lived in fear of threats, like the Krell. Each one made the same request. They wanted human protection. They wanted to ally with the predators who had proven they could be trusted. Chairman Da-Yoon watched the galaxy's power structure shift before her eyes. For centuries, the Council had operated on a principle of cautious neutrality. Problems were debated, studied, and addressed through careful diplomacy. It had worked well enough when threats were rare and distant. But the Krell incident had revealed a harsh truth. When real danger came, the Council's careful approach meant death for those who needed help immediately. The humans offered something different. They offered action. They offered protection. They offered a promise that calling for help meant someone would actually come back by the end of the session. 23 species had requested formal defense pacts with humanity. It was the biggest shift in galactic politics in living memory. Captain Min Seo watched from her ship as the council session concluded. Commander Sunho stood beside her, shaking his head in amazement. We came to save one species, and we ended up changing the entire galaxy. We came to do the right thing, Min Seo corrected. Everything else is just consequences. On the Velen home world, Eunji stood with her family in front of their damaged home. Human Marines were helping with reconstruction, working alongside Velen civilians. She watched a human soldier carefully repair a child's toy that had been crushed during the battle, taking time from reconstruction work to make a child smile. Her grandmother, who had survived the attack, stood beside her. I never thought I would say this, but I'm glad the humans exist. They're terrifying, yes, but they're terrifying in the way a guard dog is terrifying. Dangerous to threats, protective of those they've chosen to defend. Yunji nodded. The council called them monsters to fight monsters. But they're not monsters. They're just people who are willing to fight monsters. There's a difference. Across the galaxy, in the dark spaces between stars, the Krell hive mind processed the data from the battle. The humans had beaten them decisively, had driven them from a system they should have consumed easily. The hive mind updated its classification of humanity. No longer prey. No longer potential food. Now they were marked as apex threats, predators to be avoided. The message spread through Krell space. Stay away from human-protected systems. The cost is too high. And on Earth, in the halls of government, military leaders studied the battle reports and came to their own conclusions. Humanity had found its role in the galaxy. Not conquerors. Not explorers looking for profit. But protectors. Guardians who stood between the innocent and those who would harm them. It was a role humans had played throughout their history on smaller scales. Now they would play it on a galactic stage. Captain Mean Seo received new orders from Earth Command. The Rapid Response Fleet was being expanded. More ships, more personnel, more resources dedicated to protecting species that couldn't protect themselves. Humanity was committing to its new role. As the Indomitable prepared to return to Earth. Min Seo recorded a message for the Velen people. You called for help, and we answered. That's what humans do. Remember that, and know that you're not alone anymore. None of you are. As long as there are humans in this galaxy, those who prey on the innocent will find us standing in their way. The message was broadcast across the Velen system and beyond. It reached vulnerable worlds throughout the galaxy. It reached species who had lived in fear for generations. And it gave them something they hadn't had before. Hope, because somewhere in the galaxy, predators had learned to protect the prey, and nothing would ever be the same.